How's it everyone, Grant here? Welcome to my camera comparison between the brand new iPhone 12 Pro and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II. And so I previously compared the Xperia 1 Mark II up against the iPhone 11 Pro Max. So if you haven't checked that out, I'll try to leave a card for you or a link in the description should you choose to want to check that out for yourself. Now, as I always do, I'll show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions to help you decide which of these two camera systems are going to be best for your needs. And so, full disclaimer here, this is going to be a point and shoot style comparison. So if you're looking for more of a video that explains the manual controls and results from the Xperia 1 Mark II, there's a bunch of other videos out there that I highly suggest you go check out. But if you're interested in point and shoot results like I am, I'm more of a point and shoot user, not so much into the manual controls, but I do like what Sony has to offer from an overall phone package, then maybe this video will help you out. All photos from the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II were taken in its Photo Pro app in auto mode, so you get to see the results from its brand new Photo Pro app there. And pretty much everything else, portrait mode, videos from the front-facing camera and rear cameras, were all taken from its stock camera app. If you're looking for Cinema Pro results from the Xperia 1 Mark II, I have another video where I have some samples on that I'll also link in the description if you want to go ahead and check that out a little bit later. So, all that being said, let's go ahead and check out all the photos and videos, and I'll come back in the end and I'll let you know which one I thought did better and which one I personally preferred. Hey everyone, so we're out here in the park testing the video on the iPhone 12 Pro and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II. This is both at 1080p 30 frames per second. And with the iPhone, I can switch between the cameras while recording. So I can switch from this wide to ultra wide or the telephoto. On the Sony, once you start recording, you're locked into that camera lens. So I can't switch at all right now. So they're both on the standard wide angle lens. And as I pan up here, you'll see both cameras adjust for that blue sky. And right now, at least in the viewfinder, the Sony has a lot more shadows in those trees. We'll see what it looks like once it's post-processed. And the iPhone is clearing out those shadows and everything looks pretty bright. So the real scene that I'm seeing with my eyes is somewhere in between, but iPhone's a little bit closer just because there's not as much of that shadow in those trees there. But the sky, Sony has a bluer or truer sky color than the Apple from what I'm seeing, at least in the viewfinder. If I pan over here to the right, we'll do a little bit of zoom test on that tower. So 2 times with the iPhone. Pinch to zoom in to about 2 times here on the Sony, and I can go max 3 times on the Xperia and a max 6 times digital on the iPhone. And so I tap to back that out on both phones, and we'll do some autofocus tests here on the post. First with the iPhone, and that focused right up, and I refocused away, focus again. So really fast autofocus here with the iPhone. Now we'll try with the Xperia. Not quite focused up there. Let's tap, and there you can see it focus up. So move away, and the refocus is pretty quick. But again with Xperia, not quite willing to focus. If we tap, you can kind of see it focus up, away, and one more time. And I'll tap to focus one more time, and it focused up a lot better there. So not quite great focus on the Sony for some reason. That's kind of how it's been in every test that I've done with it. But we'll test stabilization as I go down the stairs here on both phones. And this is where both should be doing very well. Sony's stabilization as well as Apple's is generally very good. And we'll stop and pan around into the trees and kind of see what the changing lighting conditions do to that video and with that bright sun there. Hey everyone, so we're gonna do the same test in the park again, this time at 4K 30 frames per second on both phones. And again, I'll pan up to the sky so you can see it adjust for the blue. And same thing, I'm seeing a lot more shadows in the viewfinder of the Sony than with the iPhone. But again, the blue skies, again in the viewfinder at least, the blue is closer to what I'm seeing with the Sony. Pan over here, we'll test zoom here again at 4K. So again, 2 times on the iPhone. Pinch to zoom on the Xperia to about 2 times, right there. And we'll go max 3 times again on the Sony, and you'll still get a max 6 times on the iPhone. So if I back those out on both phones, we'll autofocus test again here in 4K. So iPhone first, and again that focused up right away, so still nice and snappy autofocus with the iPhone. And let's try it with the Xperia. A little bit better there actually at 4K. So with Sony, you kind of have to get the distance right. Minimum focusing distance isn't that great, but if you get the right distance, you can see there it focuses up and away, and one more time. So no need to tap to focus this time, but you can see it go in and out of focus. But when I get the right distance from the object, focuses up pretty well. So stabilization test here in 4K. I suspect they're both still doing pretty well here, even in 4K. But we'll stop again and pan around so you can see how it does in 4K into the afternoon sunlight. Hey everyone, here's a front-facing camera test on the iPhone 12 Pro and Xperia 1 Mark II. This is both being shot at 1080p 30 frames per second on each phone. And the iPhone can record up to 4K 60 frames per second, but I want to keep a like-for-like resolution for this test here. And so as you can see, the sun is in front of me, so there's a lot of shadow behind me. And so if I pan over this way, both of these cameras should kind of correct and expose for that a little bit better. And as I start walking, we'll test the stabilization out here on the front-facing cameras. So I just want to give you a quick sample clip here to give you a feel for how these front-facing cameras compare, both at the same resolution at 1080p. So let me know what you think here. Hey everyone, here we go again with the same test. This time I've got the iPhone 12 Pro at 4K 60 frames per second. So you compare its max resolution to the Xperia 1 Mark II's 1080p, which is its max resolution there. Also got a plane flying overhead, so you can see how the audio is doing compared to my voice here. And again, I'll pan this way so you can see how the cameras adjust for that light change and how it handles the exposure there. And I'll start walking again so you can see the iPhone stabilization at 4K 60 up against the Xperia 1 Mark II and its 1080p stabilization here. So let me know what you think about this test and the differences in what you're seeing as far as resolution in the video here. Everyone, so here's a low light test between the iPhone 12 Pro and Xperia 1 Mark II. This is both with the standard wide lens. You can't switch between the lenses once you start recording on the Xperia. And so I'll pan this way and move up into that bright light. And both these phones, at least in the viewfinder, seem to be handling that light very well. Most other phones would flare out that light pretty badly. So all things considered, pretty good as far as bright lights from both phones here. Xperia was doing a little bit better with that light, I think. But we'll walk this way and we'll test some of the lighting conditions as well as stabilization. So as you walk from that fairly well lit area, we'll walk towards a much darker area so we can see how it handles the light transition. Just give an idea of what it looks like here in some different lighting. And at least in the viewfinder, Xperia is looking much darker, but that's pretty much how dark it actually is out here. As you can see, we have the sidewalk lights here. That's pretty much it. Pan up into the night sky. And again, much darker on the Xperia, at least to the viewfinder, but again, it is pretty dark. Pan around here where there's a little bit more lights, see what that looks like. So the iPhone definitely is brightening up the scene. A little bit of noise, but at least you can see much more of what's out there. So again, a quick test in 1080p on the iPhone 12 Pro and Xperia 1 Mark II. Hey everyone, so here we go with the same scene, this time at 4K 30 frames per second on both phones. Again with the main wide angle lens. As I pan back over here again and into that bright light again, just to give you a feel for what that looks like on both phones. And again, this being a fairly well lit area, we'll pan over this way and we'll start walking into our stabilization test again, as well as seeing how the video is looking here in the changing light. So as it goes from a fairly well lit area to a darker area, let's see how well that transition does here in 4K. Usually things are a little bit darker in 4K than they are at 1080p, so we'll see how both these phones are handling it. But at least in the viewfinder, again, the iPhone seems to be brightening up the scene at the expense of some noise, but it really depends on what you want. Do you want it to look like how it actually is, even if it's really dark? Or do you want to actually be able to see what you're shooting without using a bright light or anything kind of a flash? And we'll pan this way, again, where there's a little bit more light so you can kind of see what that looks like now. So again, 4K test, iPhone 12 Pro, Xperia 1 Mark II here in low light. Hey everyone, so here's a front-facing camera test and a bit of low light between the iPhone 12 Pro and Xperia 1 Mark II. Both are at 1080p 30 frames per second. That's the max resolution and frame rate on the Xperia, while the iPhone 12 Pro can record to 4K 60. Again, this is just an apples to apples resolution at 1080p between the two phones. So you can see I got some bright lights around me. You can kind of see how the front-facing camera handles those lights. And we'll just start walking so we can test the stabilization. And just like the rear camera test, I'll be walking into an area with a little bit less light to see how it handles the transition there between a lot more light to a little bit less light. And again, I've got the fountain here, so we can test the audio and see how well the audio is picking up my voice versus that background noise on the fountain. So as you can see here, it's a little bit darker in this area here. And I can pan this way so you can see the bright lights that are going to be behind me. How does that affect the picture quality, and how do those lights look? Actually, again, both front-facing cameras seem to be handling the bright lights really well, not really flaring them out nearly as badly as some other cameras do. And we'll turn this way back into a little bit more dark area here so you can see what that's looking like here on both phones. So again, front-facing camera test on both phones here at 1080p. Hey everyone, here's another front-facing camera test between the iPhone 12 Pro and Xperia 1 Mark II. This time I've got the iPhone at 4K 30 frames per second, and Xperia is still at its max resolution at 1080p. This is just to compare the 4K versus 1080p on the iPhone versus the Xperia. And again, bright lights behind me. You can see how that's doing here on the iPhone in 4K. And we'll test stabilization from the front-facing camera at 4K on the iPhone. So hopefully you get a good idea of what the 4K footage here looks like on the iPhone and what it can do at a higher resolution here in low light, and how that compares to the Xperia 1 Mark II in 1080p. And so a little bit darker area here. You can see how that looks. The iPhone should be looking a little bit darker at 4K than it did at 1080p. But do let me know what you see and what you think. And again, we'll test this out into the bright lights behind me. And we'll pan back here into the darker area, just so you can see one more last time. 4K on the iPhone 12 Pro, 1080p on the Xperia 1 Mark II. Let me know what you think. Hey everyone, so I just want to end this video with some footage from the front-facing cameras indoors, as well as let you know what I thought about how each of these phones performed. And so my thoughts are pretty much the same thoughts that I had when I compared the Xperia 1 Mark II up against the iPhone 11 Pro Max, because Apple and Sony just take completely different approaches to their smartphone cameras. And so Apple's really after that point-and-shoot experience and trying to give you the best possible photo or video straight out of the camera with minimal effort. And so their photos and videos are going to lean towards brighter imagery. You're going to have more pop in their colors, warmer color tones, and a little bit sharper in every way. And so that's pretty much Apple, and they're trying to give you that best result out of the camera with minimal to no editing. Whereas Sony's really after the prosumer market, or the pro photographer who wants to use their phones for quick photos or videos, but doesn't want to sacrifice on the control level that they have over those cameras. And so they're really admittedly focused on their pro apps, their Photo Pro, Cinema Pro apps, and they really haven't updated their stock camera app at all since previous generations. And so quickly and simply put, pretty much everything taken from the stock camera app, things like portrait mode, the front-facing photos and video, all that look better on the iPhone because Apple's put more emphasis on that, and Sony just has not. Now with the rear-facing photos and using the Photo Pro app, to me personally, I prefer the results that came out of the Xperia 1 Mark II. The colors are more natural, they're sharp but not over-sharpened like what I was seeing with Apple, and they give you a much more natural shallow depth of field, or more that blurry background or bokeh straight out of the camera without having to rely on a lot of portrait mode effects, just because Sony has that larger sensor. And so if you like those things, I think you're going to like the Xperia 1 Mark II, especially if you are a camera nut, a photographer, and you still want those manual controls as well. But it still does very well in auto mode through the Photo Pro app for taking photos. If you like the more point and shoot straight out of the camera, you like things punchier, kind of like quote unquote more social media ready, you'll probably like the iPhone results. So for me, pretty much everything outside of the rear facing photos goes to the iPhone. And again, rear facing photos through the Photo Pro app, even in auto mode, I like the results that I see coming out of the Xperia 1 Mark II. So again, that's just what I have to think. I want to hear what you have to think after seeing all the photos and videos. Which phone did you prefer? Leave a comment down below. Let me know which one you liked and why, and we'll continue our conversation down there. And as always, thanks for watching.